so we finished the series on bits. Now it's important now to talk about how you connect the bit to your hands. That's the reins. I have our 4 different types of reins that we use in our barn, and let's talk about it today. So what we use is a new or very grippy rubber rein, an older, less grippy rubber rein, a thin flat leather rein, and a thick flat leather rein. Once the grippy rein gets not so grippy as happens, it becomes the less grippy one. And the flat leather rein, the thick flat leather rein, is the same width and feel in your hand as holding the leather one, so it sits in your hand well. I know most people might not think about their reins very much. You know, if something doesn't feel right, they always think about changing the chain or changing the bit. But a lot of times the problem is not the bit, it's how you've connected the bit to your hands. It's your reins. And by adjustments to the reins that you're using, you can greatly affect the feel that you have in your hands and the feel your horse has of what you're doing. So let me describe what I'm talking about. First of all, on the flat, I only use flat leather reins on the flat. Why? 1, I don't need any extra grip. I get asked all the time, what happens if the rein is not grippy enough? And my response is, if the flat leather rein is not grippy enough on the flat, my ride is wrong. The right answer is not more grip. The right answer is rethinking my ride. Secondly, the flat leather reins last so much longer than the rubber reins. And they're cheaper. So they last longer and they're cheaper to boot. So it's just better. When you have a bunch of reins, it just, it saves a lot of money, and they're consistent. Because they last so long, it's consistent every day. You have the same feel in your hands, and that's important. So on the flat, why would I choose a thin leather versus a thick leather? So the thick leather is about 7/8 inch wide this direction and 5/8 wide with the thin one. There isn't really, if you have a horse that's super, super light, it's nicer to go with a thin leather rein because you have more sensitivity in your fingers. If you need to have a little bit more load, not heavy, but just a bit more load, then the thicker one sits in your hand a bit better. And that's nice to have. When you need the horses to sit a little bit, it's nice that with the thicker flat leather rein, the rein just sits in your hand. And it's the same thing with the rubber reins. It's really nice for the reins to just sit in your hands when you're going around. If they're too narrow for what you need, you end up clenching your fist, and you have very little feel in a hand like this. You have a lot of feel in a hand like this. And so we tune the rein based off of the feel we want. Now, I know it might sound weird to have different rubber reins, even though they're the same. It's just one's old and one's new. But when you have 2 reins in your hands, it's nice sometimes to have, you can control how much of each rein you use by how grippy that rein is. So, for example, if I'm holding the very grippy rubber rein and the thick flat leather rein, I will have more use of the grippy rubber rein and less use of the flat rein. So if I wanted more use on the top rein with the grip, I'd put this on top and the flat rein on the bottom, or vice versa. So I can change that depending on the feel I am going for. All right, so here we have a closer view so you can see. So you can very clearly see this rein here is narrower than this rein here. Like I said, this is 5/8 inch, this is 7/8 inch. So most of the time when I flat, it's generally in this rein. When I do 2 reins on the flat, I generally use this rein. 2 pairs of it, of course. It's just that easy. I know the feel, they're the same every day. But the key here is when you start going to 2 reins per hand. I know most people, they go with converters. It's simpler on your hands. But you could add so much more nuance when you learn how to use 2 reins. Because then you can really act on the bit the way that it's designed. So what I mean is, you'll take a rein. In this case, we're doing a flat leather, and let's do a new rubber. So this is the way I used to show basically every class when I would have 2 reins. And they'd sit in your hands like this. So you can clearly see in this case, I will pull more on the rubber rein because it's grippier and it's on my normal finger, where the leather rein is outside. But you can also see they are designed to be the same size. So this sits in my hand really well. And I can just sit with my hand like this. I don't need to clench to grip. Now for you, your hands might not be as big as mine. You might need thinner reins. That's totally fine. It's just, this works for my hand size, but the same principles apply. Now, let's say I needed, this goes to the top, the main rein, the top rein, let's say of a pelham, and this goes to the bottom. Let's say I wanted more action of the, more rotation of the shank. All I have to do is move this rubber rein to the bottom of the pelham and the leather rein to the top. That way I'll have more grip on the rubber, which pulls more rotation. I can also take the reins and flip them like this in my hands. That's another way you can play with how the reins sit in your hands. Recently, what I've started to do, because again, you know, like we've been talking about how the reins sit in your hands, I will ride with one new, very grippy rubber rein. And new, it's just the grippiness level, and it's just a feel thing. I will ride like this because it just helps the reins sit in my hand. Again, your hands are probably smaller than mine, and so maybe this much rein in your hand is too much. That's up for you to decide. You can also tell I don't have no stops, none of that, because I like my hands to be able to go up the rein and back down the rein in a smooth manner. Sometimes you want your reins to be short, sometimes long. And when you go from long and you give by sliding, it's so much easier when you don't have a stop or any of the stoppers. That's my own personal preference. There's nothing wrong with having stops. I don't think there's even anything wrong with having like knots, or some people put like martingale stops, the rubbers, and stitch them in. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's about getting you to have your hands in the right place in a way that can communicate clearly to your horse. First of all, you can see all the reins are edge stitched the same. So they all look correct. They all match the bridles, and it looks correct, which is important. I hate when reins are mismatched and it just looks very, I just don't like it. I think it looks tacky. Next little tip that we do is we will rubber band in our martingale stops. This is the martingale stop is a requirement to have on your bridle, but you're not allowed to stitch them in because it needs to stay mobile. However, I've never had any stewards stop me from doing this, but it keeps it in the right place so it's not moving, and it allows the martingale ring to move, but this allows me to keep the ring for the martingale free and moving without stitching in this keeper. And also another benefit of this is you can take it off and it helps you keep the rein clean and maintain the reins. We often take our reins off the bridles, and you can see this rein, I've had this rein for many years, and you can see there's no cracks, there's no buildup of metal and whatnot. It's important to keep these reins clean so that you know, again, no cracks, nothing like that, so that you know when you go in the ring and you pull on the reins, they're not going to snap on you. All right, so I hope seeing this gives you some ideas of how we deal with our reins and how thickness and grippiness and varying that depending on what you're trying to do can really change the way the bit feels with your horse and the way the horse feels to you. You know, it's a very finely detailed thing. Don't always change the bit. A lot of times it's just the reins that you need to change.